You know the picture, right? A sun-drenched parlor, the delicate clinking of teacups, and women in these gorgeous, flowing floral dresses. It's the classic image of afternoon tea, and it seems so utterly charming and perfectly English. But behind that idyllic scene of the tea dress and the whole ritual it's named for, there's this fascinating, hidden story. It's about rebellion, social engineering, and the quiet fight for a woman's place in the world. So let's really dig into that question. How on earth did two simple things, a piece of clothing and a beverage, become these massive symbols in Victorian England? How did they end up shaping the lives of middle and upper class women in ways you would just never expect? Because here's the thing, it's a huge contradiction. What we're going to uncover is that the story of the tea dress is absolutely about women finding a new kind of freedom. But it's also about how that very freedom was really carefully managed, contained within this whole new set of rules. It ended up being, well, a kind of a gilded cage. Okay, so let's start with the good part, the liberation. The tea gown, which is what they first called it, was nothing short of a revolution in your wardrobe. It was a direct punchback against the single most oppressive piece of clothing of the time, the corset. I mean, the difference is just night and day. On one hand, you've got the corset. This device so tight, it could literally displace a woman's internal organs and make it hard to even breathe. And then you have the tea gown. It was a literal breath of fresh air. It was made from light, breezy fabrics, it had no punishing boning, and it was designed for one thing: comfort. And this wasn't just about feeling comfy. The tea gown offered women real, genuine independence. A woman could put it on all by herself, which was a huge deal, thanks to the buttons down the front. That freed her from needing a maid. It meant she had the flexibility to run her house and hang out with friends without being trapped in a fashion prison. For the Victorian era, this was a seriously radical idea. But, and this is a big but, here's the catch. This newfound liberty, it was confined to the house. If you wore a tea gown with no corset and its super convenient front fastening design out in public, oh, that was considered incredibly improper. So this symbol of freedom was, quite literally, kept behind closed doors. So now let's shift gears to the ritual itself, afternoon tea, and you'll start to see how this all connects. This wasn't just a snack, you know. It was a whole elaborate performance with a very, very strict script. First off, let's just clear something up that a lot of people mix up. Afternoon tea is not the same as high tea. They were for totally different social classes and had different purposes. Afternoon tea was a light, fancy, leisurely thing for the rich, served on low tables to tide them over till a late dinner. High tea, on the other hand, was a big, hearty meal for the working class after a long day's work, served at a high dining table. So the ritual we're talking about here is strictly afternoon tea. And this ritual was governed by a mind-boggling number of rules. I mean, everything was prescribed. How you stirred your tea, gently, back and forth, no clinking the spoon. The right way to eat a scone, break it with your hands, never, ever cut it with a knife. Even how long you could visit was timed, usually no more than half an hour. And that thing with the pinky finger sticking out? Nope, that was seen as vulgar, not fancy. These weren't suggestions. This was the rigid code of polite society. So why? Why all these tiny, controlling rules? Well, a Victorian etiquette guide puts it pretty chillingly. A woman cannot learn too early that her first social duty is never to be in the way. Wow. So the point of all this wasn't just about being polite. It was about shaping behavior, about making sure women understood their place from the time they were little girls. And where did all these rules come from? Well, a lot of them came from etiquette handbooks, written by men. See, with the Industrial Revolution changing everything so fast, the home was seen as this last little island of stability. And these books were basically the blueprints for the ideal woman, using the very familiar, comforting ritual of tea as a way to regulate and control her behavior. Which brings us to the central paradox of this whole thing, the tea table. Was this a space where women actually had power, or was it just another kind of prison? On one hand, you could say yes, absolutely. The parlor was a woman's turf. It was her domain. Here, she was the host. She could build social networks, she could wield influence, all without her husband around. In a world that legally and financially pushed them down, this was a huge, rare opportunity for a little bit of autonomy. But you gotta ask, what kind of power was that really? Because even though women were the ones pouring the tea, the actual substance of what they could talk about was heavily, heavily censored. Conversation was policed like you wouldn't believe. No talking about scandal, no spilling secrets, and absolutely positively no discussing anything controversial, like politics. This basically left women with what they called innocent subjects, like literature or music. Any real debate, anything that might actually challenge the system, was completely off the table. And society even had a special name for women who dared to be a little too smart. A blue stocking. And trust me, it was not a compliment. It was a put-down, used to shame women who were seen as stepping out of line by being too interested in the world of ideas. This quote from an etiquette manual is just so telling. It says a woman should be educated, sure, but not for herself. No, the whole point was to make her a more pleasant companion for other people. And by other people, they mostly meant men. Her intelligence was supposed to be an accessory, not a tool for her own empowerment. So what ended up happening to this whole complicated symbol? How did the tea dress and its ritual actually make it past the Victorian era? Well, the dress itself went on this amazing journey. It started absorbing all the new styles of the decades. The flapper era in the 20s gave it that looser, dropped-waist look. By the 1940s, it had turned into the super practical shirtwaist dress, with a belted waist and, this is important, pockets. The tea dress was officially breaking out of the parlor. So what started as this private little act of rebellion against a corset, it eventually walked right out the front door and into the world. It shook off its restrictive, indoor-only status to become this beloved, versatile staple in women's fashion. It's a journey that kind of mirrors women's own journey into the public sphere. In afternoon tea, the ritual changed too. It stops being this tool for daily social control and became what it is for most of us today, a special, fun, celebratory treat. We kept all the good parts, the scones, the tiny sandwiches, but for the most part, we threw out all that rigid, controlling etiquette. So the next time you see a floral tea dress or maybe sit down for afternoon tea, it's worth asking yourself, what am I really looking at here? Is this a charming tradition that gave women a world of their own? Or was it a beautifully decorated cage designed to keep them right in their place? As we've seen, the crazy thing is, the truth is, it was both.